thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Emily Giles. I'm delighted to be hosting this evening's event with Prisoners Education Trust CEO Jon Collins. I expect most of you, or many of you in the audience, know us, know who we are. Maybe you've worked with us in one way or another, or have been a supporter. For those of you who don't, the Prisoners Education Trust, or PET, as we probably will slip into calling it, offers distance learning courses, advice and guidance to people in prison. We offer over 120 courses, including GCSEs, A-levels, open university access modules, and a wide range of professional courses. And we help around 1,500 people every year to study, giving them the skills and the qualifications that they need to build brighter futures. We also use our expertise to inform the development of policy and of practice, and to show prisons, policymakers and the public the positive impact that education can make, both for prisoners and for their families, and also for wider society as a whole. And we couldn't do this without the support of people like yourselves. Every little does help, as they say. So if you are able to donate as much or as little as you would like throughout the course of this evening, there will be a link in the chat that my wonderful colleagues from PET will put in the chat. So that's us to this evening. This is the latest in a series of Meet the Team events. I'm delighted to be joined by Jon Collins, our CEO. We will be having a discussion about Jon's first year at PET. And then this will be followed with a Q&A. So there'll be opportunities for questions from the audience. So please do put any questions you might have in the Q&A section at the bottom. Our colleagues are also keeping an eye on the chat if you want to use the chat to connect with each other, to introduce yourselves and say hello on this lovely Wednesday evening. And just a quick housekeeping note, the event will be recorded. You might have heard a warning that the event is being recorded, but this doesn't involve any recording of the audience. Obviously your cameras aren't on, your microphones aren't being recorded. It's just Jon and I. The recording is going to be uploaded to our website, so if you think that there are colleagues who haven't been able to join, or if you'd like to share it with anyone afterwards, we would love you to do that, so more and more people can see the conversation. So let's get started. I'll start by introducing myself. I've just talked to you for 5 minutes without actually introducing myself. My name is Emily Giles. I'm a trustee of the Prisoners Education Trust, and I've been a trustee for about 2.5 years now, which I couldn't quite believe when I worked out earlier this afternoon. And like most, if not all of my colleagues at PET, I'm incredibly passionate about education. It's one of the things that really drives me in my work. In my day job, I lead the criminal justice program at the Bell Foundation, and I'm sure I've worked with various people in the audience in various guises over the last few years since entering the sector. And I'm joined this evening by our CEO, Jon, who began as CEO of PET just over a year ago in April last year, when he joined us from the Magistrates Association. And again, I'm sure many of you will have worked with Jon in various ways over the years, including in his time as Chief Exec of the Restorative Justice Council, Deputy Director of the Police Foundation, and positions as well with the CJA, the Criminal Justice Alliance, and NACRO. Welcome, Jon. How are you this evening?
Good, thanks, Emily. Really looking forward to chatting to you this evening.
Great, thank you. I think I've talked enough, so I will lead straight into a question to you. So I've mentioned briefly some of the other areas that you've worked in, some of the other roles that you've held. What drew you to work at PET?
Yes, it's always slightly alarming to hear your career read back to you like that. It makes you realise just how long, made me realise just how long I've been working in this sector. I think the first thing that drew me to working at PET was really the issue that we work on, prison education. Through all those roles that you just mentioned, I've been working in the criminal justice voluntary sector for more than 20 years now. And the importance of prison education has always been something that stood out, both as something that can make a real difference to people in prison in terms of turning their lives around, but too often doesn't, because they're either not able to access it, or what they do access isn't of good enough quality. So it's clearly a really important issue, and I think that it's one where you can see that it's possible to make a real difference. Secondly, I think the organisation, Prison Education Trust itself, as I said, I've worked in the sector for a long time, and I've always really admired what PET does, and the way it's respected by everyone, from government ministers to MPs to prison governors, to maybe most importantly by learners themselves. And When I've spoken to people who've been in prison in the past, they've often mentioned how a course with PET while they were in prison has helped them to sort of go on to do what they wanted to do when they leave. So just an organisation that I've always really admired and been impressed by. I knew my predecessor Rod, so when I heard that he was retiring, it was too good an opportunity not to apply for. And when I did apply, finally, as I got to know the organisation a bit better, sort of through the recruitment process, the more I got to know it, the more I liked it. I think the organisation's values match mine, but also as I got to meet the trustees and the staff team and some of our alumni, I just thought it seemed like a really great place to work, and the staff seemed like that perfect combination of people who are really good at what they do and really expert and professional, but also friendly and welcoming, and a great team to have joined.
That's always really good to hear. That's great, and I echo that completely. When I knew of PET for a long time and then came in contact with them, and they're one of those organisations that you like more and more the more you get to know them. I think that's really accurate. So you've been here for a year. Obviously quite an interesting time to have joined the sector. What do you think PET's biggest achievements have been in the year since you joined?
Yes, I can't believe it's been a year really, and I'm glad to say that getting to the more I continue to be, the more that I've got to know the organisation and the people we work with, the more I've enjoyed it, the more I've liked it. It has been a strange year. I didn't meet many of my colleagues face to face for months when I first started. I finished in one job sitting in my living room and then started a new job still sitting in the same place in my living room. But even though it has been an unusual year, and a year clearly still affected by COVID, I think the organisation has achieved a huge amount. Now, I think the first thing to stress is that we've continued throughout COVID and over the last year to provide a really high quality service to our learners and to people in prison. And I think from outside the organisation, you sometimes don't see just how much of an operation that is on a month-by-month basis. Every month, we receive a couple of hundred applications from people in prison. They all need to be read and entered onto our systems and scored. And then for those people who are successful, we need to let them know, and we need to order courses and make sure those courses are delivered to the right prison and to the right person. And for those people who aren't successful, we need to get back to them with really detailed feedback about what they can do, so when they come back to us, we can support them to access a course. And no sooner are we finished with one cycle of that, but another one rolls through and we start again. It's every month. And I think that despite COVID and despite all the challenges of not being in an office together, we've continued to do that to a really high standard. So I don't think as a learner, in terms of your interactions with PET, you would have noticed a substantial difference. And that's what we've always been aiming to do, which meant that over the last year, we were able to fund just under 1,500 people last year. So slightly down on pre-COVID levels when we would have been about 1,600, but still a significant number of courses that we're able to fund. But on top of that, we were also able to provide information, advice and guidance to people in prison through a free phone advice line, which we launched during COVID. It is now a kind of core part of our day-to-day offer, but also by letter, by email, on the phone with family members and members of staff. So about 4,500 interactions providing support around prison education last year. So what would normally be seen as business as usual remains a huge operation for quite a small staff team, and one that I think they do astonishingly well. One of the things that's nice about being back in the office is that I've been able to see some of that in person and hear some of the advice line calls being done, and you recognise just how much each member of the staff team, how much effort they make to make sure that we get it right so that the learner has the best possible experience. So business as usual has been great and remains really important in terms of what we do. But I'm going to try and pick out a few things that I think were particular highlights from the last year that I think were particularly important, in no particular order. So the first one, and one that happened quite soon after I started, so I can take almost no credit for it at all, was that we launched a new prospectus, which I've got a prop, looks like this, though you're not really going to be able to see it very well. So it's a new prospectus with 120 or so courses that we offer to people in prison. And while producing a publication may not seem like a huge amount of work, what went behind that in making sure that every course that we make available to someone in prison is of high quality, is suitable to be completed by someone while they're in custody, and that we've got confidence in the supplier in terms of what they're able to deliver, has been a huge piece of work. And I think what we offer now is a broad range of courses to cater to a whole range of different interests and needs. But we're confident that what we offer is of a very high standard. and putting that prospectus together, and we're refreshing it again for this year. It's been a key step in making sure that what we offer is of the best possible value to our learners, and also to make sure for our funders and supporters that we're using every pound they give them to support a really good quality course. That's one thing. Second thing, I think we played a really important role in terms of keeping prison education on the policy agenda. So moving away from our sort of service delivery work, another core strand of what we do at Prisons Education Trust is ensuring that we use our expertise, our knowledge, our reputation to inform the development of policy around prison education. And it's been a busy year. The Select Committee is doing an inquiry into prison education, the Education Select Committee. The Ofsted and the Prisons Inspectorate are looking at prison education. There's been a prisons white paper published, and they're also looking at a new prison education service to roll out in a couple of years' time when the current contracts come to an end. So there's been a lot going on in the sort of policy development world, and PET has really been at the heart of a lot of that work. So with the Select Committee inquiry, for example, we were one of the key people to persuade them to do it in the first place. We've given evidence in writing and orally, but we've also provided sort of advice and support behind the scenes. And we also supported the Select Committee to invite some past prison learners to appear before the Select Committee and give their first-hand experience of what prison education was like. And I think that was really important in terms of enabling those people to speak for themselves around their own experiences, as well as ensuring that members of the Select Committee have been able to make some visits into prisons where possible to see it firsthand. So that influencing work is really important in terms of what we do. And the last highlight, just to pick out, is that we've also published a new strategy for the next 5 years. And again, a lot of work, short document, but a document that a lot of work goes into. So long before I started, talking to our learners, our alumni, to prison staff, to trustees, stakeholders, a whole range of people, to ensure that what we put together is a clear plan for us to focus on for the next 5 years, and something that we can show where the organisation is going. And I won't go into that in too much detail now, but maybe we'll get a chance to talk about future plans a bit later. And the last thing I want to say around the last year is I think often when you're talking about what we do and the highlights of our work, you end up focusing on our service delivery staff and on our policy and influencing work. I think it's just really important to recognise the hugely impressive job that some of the sort of behind the scenes staff at PET do. So our fundraising, operational finance colleagues, we move pretty seamlessly from being an office-based organisation to all working remotely. And while it may have been seamless, it certainly wasn't easy. And I think a lot of credit to those people who were involved in that. And also, we couldn't do any of what we do without the money that the fundraising team raised. Emily's already kindly sort of reminded people about the opportunities to donate to us, but our fundraising team worked incredibly hard to raise that money so that we can use that to ensure that people in prison are able to access educational opportunities that they wouldn't otherwise be able to access. So all that work that goes on kind of behind the scenes and unseen a lot of the time is invaluable in enabling PET to do what we do.
Yeah, thank you, John. What a comprehensive answer, and completely agree with you. It's an organisation that is a pleasure to be a trustee of, and I think that is because of the staff and the attitude and the wonderful work that they do. It's fantastic. Something that really came through in a lot of your answers is the focus on the learner, the prisoner learner. You mentioned that you get them involved in the policy work and taking them to meet the select committees. What is it about the work about PET's work that is so important for people in prison?
Sure. I mean, we know why education in prison is important. I could talk about percentages and potential reductions, but it's a Wednesday evening and I'm not going to. But we know that people who access education are less likely to reoffend when they leave prison. And we know that people who access education are more likely to get a job when they leave prison. And having a job is a gateway into all sorts of other things, including accommodation, which we know is really important. And we've got the evidence to show that accessing education and accessing a course provided by PET in particular is effective in helping people to move on successfully when they leave prison. But I think it's more than that as well. And when you talk to our learners and when you talk to prison staff who work with them on a day-to-day basis, it's important. I think it's really important to recognise that taking part in education, doing one of our courses, has a huge broader impact in terms of improving well-being, supporting good mental health, And when you look back at the last 2 years, when people have been in their cells, often 23 hours a day during COVID lockdowns, and don't have access to some of the activities they'd normally have access to, which are, even in the best of times, fairly limited. Being able to access education and get that support is invaluable in terms of giving some people something positive to focus their time and attention on, but also in recognizing that, you know, we're investing in them and we believe in them, that they can do something useful with that. And I think that's a really important message, that prison education is a way of saying that, you know, if you're in prison, we want to support you to do the things that you're interested in. I think that's where PET really comes in, because when you look at prison education, in terms of the sort of mainstream provision, it is narrow. It's focused on literacy and numeracy, some basic IT skills, and then there is other offers, vocational and other sorts of courses. But what we try and do is complement that and add things that people can be genuinely interested and engaged with, that they might fall outside that key provision. So yes, GCSEs, A-levels, access courses for those people who want to go on to university. Yes, vocational courses, so health and safety type courses or construction. Logistics and warehousing is a growing area for us in terms of people who want to move into that when they leave prison. But also things that maybe aren't going to move someone directly into a job, but are really important in terms of engaging them and giving them something that they feel they value. So whether that's creative writing or drawing or beekeeping course that we offer, I think it's really important to have that breadth in terms of what we offer as an organisation, because that means that people who are in prison have those choices of things that they want to do, and we'd like more of them to have those options and more of them to be able to access PET's, what PET has to offer, and talk about that maybe a bit more in a bit. But I think we know it works on a sort of instrumental reducing reoffending level, but we also know it's got that broader relevance. And that's why the support and the information that we offer as an organisation is so important, because we can help people make sure that people choose the right course for them, that's going to help them to achieve the things that they want to achieve. And that might not be about their next job, particularly for people who are on longer sentences. That might be about what engages and interests them. And when I've spoken to people who have done our courses, often, you know, doing something that they never thought they would be interested in doing as part of a PET course was an opportunity for them to find out different side of themselves, whether that's writing poetry or doing sort of art they might not have realized before. So yeah, I think we know what that sort of impact is, and you know, regularly we get feedback from our learners. We get postcards posted back to us with little comments on them. We have more sort of feedback and monitoring. When I first started, we weren't back in the office, and one of the things that I did from time to time was open all the posts and scan it and send it off to different people. And one of my favorite bits of that was finding little snippets of feedback from people who said that doing a PET course, you know, made a huge difference. Just one little snippet from one of them here. When I was first convicted, I lost all hope of having a future in something that would bring me joy and success in my work and professional life. PET has changed that. Allowing me to complete my business startup course has given me back hope of a better life. So business startup course doesn't exactly sound very glamorous, but you can see from those sort of comments, and we have literally hundreds of them here in the office, how much difference it can make to individuals to do that sort of course. And I think that's why it's really important to us to always make sure that we ask our learners what their experiences of our courses have been, and we try and make sure that we provide the right courses that help them to achieve what they want to achieve by doing them. Because it's a big commitment from them, it's a commitment from us, and we make sure that way that they really gain from the time they put into it.
Yeah, fantastic. I urge everybody to go and have a look at the PET website, because these quotes like that are dotted throughout the website and dotted throughout the strategy and the reports and things, and they really do bring it home. I got a bit emotional hearing you read that one out, because it does really, it's easy to forget the impact on individual people, and it's really, really important. You mentioned in particular the importance of PET's work over the last year, the additional support that was given and the isolation that prisoners were facing, that PET were able to continue to deliver education was really important. Where are we at now with COVID and the impact that that's having on PET's work? Is that an ongoing issue?
I mean, it is an ongoing issue. I mean, obviously COVID's had a huge impact on the prison system over the last couple of years. So prisons had to sort of go into a permanent state of lockdown during COVID, with people in their cells, as I said, often 23 hours a day, even more in some cases, without access to education departments or libraries or gyms or any of the things they might have previously been able to access. And while things are getting back to something more like normal in the community now, though it still doesn't feel quite like normal, but we're certainly edging in that direction. There's always a lag in terms of what happens in the prison estate. So prisons are edging back towards having more open regimes, and they are starting to get people out of their cells more, but it is still a slower process than it's been in the community. And I think what that means in practice is that fewer people are able to get into education departments in particular, and therefore fewer people hear about PET and are able to apply for our courses. So applications have been a bit lower in the last couple of years than they were pre-COVID. But having said that, as I mentioned before, I think we have held up pretty well. We're still managing to fund a pretty significant number of courses. That's edging up all the time back towards normal as prisons get more open. And I think that for us, the key message throughout the pandemic has been, we're still here, we're still offering what we've always offered. We're still reading applications, we're still funding courses. We're still working very closely with our suppliers to make sure that even with problems with access to prisons and posts and all that sort of thing, that courses are getting in and that people are able to complete them. If there's one thing that if I could wave my magic wand and fix, it would be about people doing exams and assessments in prison. It's always a challenge, but maybe a particular challenge under COVID conditions. So that's something we really need to focus on in the coming months, and making sure that people who have done those courses can complete any exams or assessments so that they can demonstrate that they've completed them and get the qualification they need. And the other thing I think to say is that a positive of COVID for us is, I mentioned our advice line. So as part of our response to COVID and not being able to get out into prisons as much as we were able to previously, we launched an advice line which is free for anybody in prisons to call. And we originally, as I said, launched it as a response to COVID. Now I think it'll be a permanent part of what we have to offer. And it has created a new part of our relationship with learners, where before we'd normally be in contact with them either through prison staff or by letter. Now we're able to speak to learners directly. They can call us up, they can get direct advice from the team here. And the team are brilliant if they can't help on the phone there and then, following it up by email or in other ways, so that we make sure that we deal with those inquiries. And I think it's a really positive thing for an organisation like us to have those direct conversations with our learners. It helps us develop a better understanding of how they're accessing our courses, what our courses are like, and makes it quicker and easier for us to resolve any issues that arise when people move from prison to prison, for example, which the prisons don't always immediately tell us about, or if course materials aren't delivered. So a mixture of kind of the advice line and all of our monitoring work helps to address those sort of issues. So there's been one small thing that's positive thing that's come out of COVID. I think it's been that, and those conversations we have now with directly with people in prison.
Yeah, always good to be able to find a silver lining in the last few years, isn't it? So let's move on from the last few years. Let's look forward. So you mentioned earlier that PET launched a new strategy earlier this year. Could you tell us a bit about that? What are PET hoping to achieve in the next 5 years?
Yeah, of course. So I think the sort of first thing to reflect on here is that when I joined PET and in my first year, and I'm as sure about this now as I was when I started, that PET wasn't an organisation that was in need of a fundamental overhaul. When we were set up, it was to provide those broader educational opportunities to people in prison. That's still what 33 years later, still essentially what we do. And the work that I've talked about around, people applying to us to access courses and us providing funding for them to do that remains absolutely at the heart of what we do, and will continue to be central to what PET has to offer. We're not throwing everything out the window and starting again with this new strategy. It's very much an evolution and building on what we've previously achieved. And we know that what we do works and has a positive impact. So we don't want to lose sight of that in terms of what we're trying to build on. But having said that, no organisation can stand still. And the staff team here is pretty ambitious about what we want to achieve for the organisation and for the people who we support in prison. So the new strategy, I guess, has four key sort of delivery aims, which I'll talk about briefly, because I'm aware we need to leave some time for questions for others. But so the first one is around extending our reach. So making sure that the services that we offer are available to every prisoner in every prison in England and Wales, and trying to make sure they're not only available, but each person in prison and each cohort of prisoners has equal ability to access them. So we want to get out into those prisons where we maybe only get 2 applications a year rather than 100 from some other prisons. And we want to look at our monitoring data and think about which cohorts of prisoners are currently less likely to contact us and how can we reach them. So we want to extend our reach out into those bits of the prison system where we maybe don't have such good contacts at the moment. We also want to extend the support that we offer. So I've talked a bit about the advice line and about the sort of growing role of information advice and guidance. And we want to build on that to make sure that from the moment that they think about applying, through the application process and through the time that people are doing a course and beyond, we're offering support to make sure they have a positive experience, particularly trying to ensure that that people complete the courses that they start, because for many people, that's an important part of doing the course is the qualification they get at the end of it, and ensuring that they're supported to do that. And any barriers they come across, whether they're individual or institutional, it's important to remember that a lot of the time when people don't complete courses, it's about problems of the system rather than them individually. So that sort of support is really important to what we do. So that extending reach and support, I guess, is about making what we do more widely available across the prison estate and growing the number of people who are able to access what we offer. Part of that as well is about beginning to make more use of digital technology to enhance the learning experience of people in prison. I could talk about the failures of prison technology for hours, but I won't. But I think there's a general will now to make digital devices and more widely available in the prison estate and to use them for educational purposes. PT needs to be at the heart of that. It needs to ensure that the courses that we offer and the resources that we offer are available digitally wherever possible. And we also need to push the Ministry of Justice and the prison service to go further and faster than they currently are in terms of rolling out digital technology. And that, I guess, leads on to our sort of fourth priority, which is around using our influence and our expertise to inform policy around digital, but also around the sort of broader design and delivery of prison education. It's really important for us that, as well as doing what we do, we also help to shape the broader environment that we operate in. And we've got an expert team here whose job it is to make sure that as an organisation, we have a voice in those policy debates. And then very briefly, so those are our sort of 4 delivery aims. Underpinning them, we have 3 more, 2 of which I just want to highlight. One is that we want to make sure that equality, diversity and inclusion is at the heart of all of our work. Easy to say, really important for any charity, something we're currently putting a lot of thought into in terms of what that means as an organisation. It aligns with our extending reach work, which I talked about, but also goes broader in terms of how we are as an employer, as an organisation, as well as a service provision organisation. So that's really important. And lastly, in terms of the ones I want to talk about, another priority is around putting people with lived experience of prison education central to all the work that we do. That's been a priority for PT for a long time. It's something that's been discussed a lot across the criminal justice sector at the moment. And I think the challenge for us for the next few years is how we build and develop on what we've already done. Ensure that people with that lived experience of the system, ensure that current prison learners are able to inform the work that we do and ensure that it's genuinely aligned with what people need. So a range of different priorities, quite ambitious, even over 5 years. I think we're quite an ambitious organisation, and we want to grow and we want to develop. But underneath all that, we want to keep on doing what we do, which is offering those opportunities to people in prison.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I'm so excited about the next few years. I think it's a really fantastic strategy. Something I want to pick up on from what you've said, you mentioned obviously an increased focus on EDI, which I'm sure many people in the audience are involved in similar work in their organisations. It's a really positive move that we've seen in the sector recently. I wonder if you could talk a bit about what else we're doing to ensure that our work is reaching these all areas of society. In the wake of Black Lives Matter and the increased sort of spotlight on racial inequalities. What more are we doing to try and reach more learners?
Yeah, so it's a core part of what we're doing, and something that we've done over the recent years to sort of build up to this is we've started to really build up the data that we gather from the people who apply to us and the people who we fund and the people who contact us for advice, including sort of EDI monitoring data, so around the protected characteristics. And that's really important, I think, because what we're doing is starting to build up a picture of what our service users look like, so we can compare that with the prison population and start to see where differences emerge. And where they do, we need to either understand why they are, or we need to take steps to address them. So it's relatively early days for this work, but in terms of thinking about underrepresented communities, in terms of our service users, we're then thinking about the courses that we offer, the partnerships that we have, the people that we work with, to try and ensure that if sections of the prison population are underrepresented in the services that we offer, we're able to find ways to address that. But also, as I said, it's not just about our service delivery, it's also about how we work as an organisation, with our staff team, with senior management team, with our board, ensuring that EDI runs through everything that we do. Maybe particularly for us in terms of inclusion, thinking about, as I mentioned a minute ago, about how we involve people with lived experience of the system in the organisation, in our decision making, in a meaningful way.
Yeah, fantastic. Again, really excited to see where that work goes. It's been really wonderful to see it develop. So I think I'm going to ask one more question and then we will move on. We've got a few questions in the Q&A and I'm keen to give people plenty of time for audience questions. So do keep those coming in. If you're on the verge, if you're hesitating to send a question, please do. I'm going to ask one, you touched on this briefly, but I hope maybe there's a quick answer. In an ideal world, what changes would, if you're in charge, tomorrow you wake up, you're the Secretary of State, it's an ideal world, what changes would you like to see made to prison education?
That was very diplomatically put. Maybe a short answer, John, here would be good. So, I mean, where to start? There's a huge amount that could be done. So I will try and keep this brief. I mean, the first thing to say is that prison education is really underfunded, and you can't provide good quality education in an environment as challenging as a prison on a shoestring. So we need more money for prison education. And also you can't deliver good quality education in a system that's in a state of our current prison system. So the stuff you can still do, but we do need to look at the bigger picture. The system is overcrowded, underfunded, understaffed, and in a terrible physical state if you go to prisons now, literally falling down in places. So it's not the right environment either, and there needs to be broader work to do that. But in terms of education specifically, I think we need a broader offer. So what we've got is narrow. It is important to have literacy and numeracy work. And as an aside, the recent work has shown that despite the focus on literacy, those with the greatest need in terms of learning to read are still not getting the support they need. So there's a broader offer in every direction. So we need high level, but also making sure we capture those with the current lowest levels of educational ability. And as part of that broader offer, I think we should be thinking much more about what further education looks like in the community and how can we replicate that in the prison system, because at the moment we're nowhere near having parity of offer between what's available in the community and what's available in prison. Secondly, what's there needs to be of better quality. So Ofsted reports again and again say that even when you take it on face value around what's there, it's not good enough. And teachers and prison staff are often doing an incredible job in very difficult circumstances, but fundamentally we need to improve the quality of what's there. And finally, already talked about digital technology. It's not the whole answer, but it is part of the answer. So there's lots to do. One thing that I would say before we move on to audience questions is there is lots to do. There's tons of things we need to improve. But amidst all the doom and gloom, there are still some real pockets of excellence out there. And one of the best bits of my job, as well as reading our learner feedback, has been where I've heard about, you know, innovative little projects or learners doing amazing stuff, whether or not it's performing Shakespeare or doing a magazine or incredible poetry or design or art. If you've ever been to the Cursor Trust exhibition, it's incredible. So there's so much good stuff out there that I find really inspiring. And I think the challenge for us and for all of us is about making sure that those pockets of excellence become the norm rather than the exception.
Yeah, fantastic. I, again, would love to echo the Cursor exhibition is one of my favourite events every year. I always go down to the South Bank and check it out. Everybody should. So actually, you've led into this nicely, John, so thank you. One of the first questions I was going to ask from the audience is around digital technology. So again, I'll be diplomatic. We haven't got long. I know you and I could sit here and talk about digital tech for hours. There's a specific question about the role of virtual campus, but I'd like to sort of make it broader than that and and just ask, what is it that needs to happen in digital technology? Is that one of the solutions to the broken system that you referred to? And what's stopping that from happening?
I mean, I think, yes, virtual campus is probably part of the solution, and we're working closely with the team behind virtual campus, as well as with the various other organisations that are involved in terms of making digital technology available within prisons. But what is available at the moment is patchy. It's not available in most prisons. Where it is available, it's still not available to most people within those prisons. And the plans for the moment, the ambition to ensure that closed prisons all have in-cell technology and a much broader availability of on-wing technology is the right one. But the sort of rollout so far is, we'd argue, not going far or fast enough. So I think there's a lot to do in terms of ensuring that we get to that endpoint where in-cell technology, again, it is the norm rather than the exception. And we're a long, long way away from that, despite a lot of people working very hard to try and make it happen. And I think there's a focus on new build prisons and new prisons and how you can make them digitally enabled in an impressive way. And that's great. And when we are building new prisons, if we're going to do that, we should make sure that education provision is sort of digitally enabled in those prisons. But most of the prison estate is not new build, and if you go to Pentonville or Brixton here in London, or older prisons all around the country, you see how far away they are from making those sorts of steps. So we need to look at the whole estate and think about how we can get to where we need to get to in the shortest possible time. And it feels like we're a long way away from that at the moment.
Thanks. Yeah, it does. It often does feel like we're far away. This might be the last question, depends on the length of your answer. This is a specific one. So you've talked about the barriers in the system, you've talked about the challenges in the system. What barriers are PET facing in expanding what we offer? What are the barriers? So this is a question from Colin, and he's given a list of examples. Is it money, politics, applications, tutor shortages, prison regime? I suspect perhaps all of the above. What's stopping PET from being able to do even more?
I mean, to a degree, all of the above. Funding is always an issue. We need to raise the money that we spend. But at the moment, that hasn't been the primary constraint in terms of, we haven't been turning away applications because of lack of funding. Fundraising team here do a brilliant job and have brought in the money we need to fund the courses that we're able to support. I think it's the number of applications that we get, and sometimes the information that's provided as part of those applications. And in the end, I think that comes down to, because we believe, and I very much hope we're right in this, that there are people out there who would benefit from doing a PET course and who would like to do a PET course, but either don't know about us or haven't been able to get to us yet. So I think capacity within prison education teams, capacity within prison staff generally, to support those learners to apply to PET is probably the single biggest barrier. But part of our role is about making sure that we're better known and we're higher profile across the prison estate. And part of our extending reach work, which I talked about, is about making sure that we're as widely known as possible so that people are banging down their prison education department's door and asking to be able to apply for a PET course, rather than waiting for prison education departments to suggest it to them. Was that short enough to fit in one more question?
It was short enough to fit in one more. Good job, John. Yeah, so this is sort of on the theme of people who don't have access to our courses, or the people that we perhaps haven't been reaching well enough or haven't been able to reach. There's a question from Fiona about remand prisoners. Obviously, with the courts crisis, it's not going anywhere anytime soon. There are a huge number of remand prisoners in our prisons, and my understanding is we're not currently able to support remand prisoners. I wonder if you could say anything on that. Fiona's question is, can we please? I suspect, unfortunately, the answer is no. But I wonder if you could say something about remand prisoners.
Yes, I mean, it's a really challenging issue. We don't at the moment, we don't at the moment support remand prisoners in terms of accessing our courses. And that is a particular challenge at the moment, because people are spending more time on remand, and we're aware of that, and we have sort of looked at it. It's not something we're planning to change at the moment, though obviously we keep who we offer what to under review at all times, and it's something that we sort of do keep an eye on. I mean, broadly speaking, it's because to sort of to generalize, the first main reason is that people who are on remand may well not stay in prison long enough, even in current circumstances, to apply to PET, for us to assess the application, them to be successful, to get the course to them, and then for them to complete the course before they leave. The remand population is inherently more volatile. They're more likely to, to either plead guilty or go to trial, potentially be released, found not guilty, get out on bail. So it's more difficult to be confident that they'll benefit from the courses that we offer them. And the second, I think the sort of second main reason is that we primarily work with and through prison education departments. So that's the sort of mechanism by which people apply to PET, and not all education departments work regularly with people on remand. So they don't necessarily have those relationships with those individuals to enable them to come via education departments to PET. So that's a really boring answer, but it is the sort of truth that there's a sort of number of practical challenges to enabling us to do that. That at the moment mean we haven't opened up our courses to that population. We do have, I didn't talk about it, but we do have some free short courses that are available, which are available for anyone, including people on remand. And our advice line is open to anyone who's in prison. So if people who are on remand want to be in contact with us and speak to us about what they might do should they receive a custodial sentence after their trial, then we're obviously happy to have those conversations and to start thinking about that with them. But at the moment, we're not able to support the remand population in terms of actually funding them for courses. But we do as much as we can to make our other services available to them.
Yeah, I think it's an example of yet another challenge that in the system full of challenges. And again, a really good sort of silver lining from the pandemic that other support has come out that is available to everybody in prison, which I think is fantastic. I was hoping to get to one more question, but I think we are going to run out of time, unfortunately. If you've asked a question and you were hoping to get it answered, do get in touch with the PET team at any time. They are wonderful people. There's a contact form on the website, and I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any further questions that way. So thank you so much, Jon. What a wonderful, it's been wonderful chatting with you. So much exciting stuff going on. I'm really excited about the new strategy, the EDI work. I think it's all fantastic. Unfortunately, audience members, I cannot let you go without one more mention of funding. If it is, as we've said, it's thanks to your support that we were able to, particularly to continue to support learners during the worst periods of the pandemic. And we now want to support even more learners in 2022, providing them with the skills and the tools that they need on release. We can only achieve this with your support. If we haven't convinced you this evening, if Jon and I haven't convinced you, I do urge you to go and take a look at our website. As we said before, all these lovely quotes from former learners, they really drive it home for me, the difference that PET makes. So please do go and have a look at our website. I believe my colleagues have dropped a link in the chat. If you are able to donate, every little helps. And it is now 7:15, so I will let you all go. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Thank you, Jon. And thank you to all of our colleagues who have done all the work in the background this evening as well. Good evening, everyone.
Thanks very much, everyone, and thanks, Emily.